afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I'd just like to start off by thanking all of the warriors who made it to the end of the day. I know I'm the last talk before a cold beverage, so thank you so much for joining me on this discussion about IoT and why it's important to my farm. I'd like to just begin by acknowledging the traditional and sacred lands that we have the privilege of gathering on today. The people of Treaty 6 and 7 region, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy comprising Siksika, Piikani, Kainai First Nations, as well as the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, tribes of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley, and the Tsuut'ina Nation. It's also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta in Region 3 and the Cree and Saulteaux. So for those of you attending this session, I also want to just acknowledge the Indigenous territories and lands in which you are working and living. So who is TELUS? And why is my phone company talking at a precision agriculture conference? That's the right button. There we go. You're correct. I mean, obviously, TELUS began, our roots are in telco, but we operate today under 5 different business verticals. And the one you're most likely familiar with is TELUS Consumer, so for your phone, internet, and security solutions. But we also have a TELUS Business vertical, and their focus is on small, medium-sized businesses. And that's where I sit today with our focus on farms being very much small and medium-sized businesses. We offer a suite of solutions there that include kind of the core telco solutions, but also we have a large IoT division and provide cybersecurity services and network services. There's a TELUS International group, and they're focused on international markets as well as providing custom offshore development, IT solutions, and advisory services. TELUS Health has been around for almost 12 years now, but it is focused on data and software services in our health service industry. And so for they do an awful lot of remote patient monitoring work, electronic record keeping, personal health records, and that pharmacy workflow. So for any of us during COVID, you may have had a virtual doctor's visit through that period, and then your doctor was able to electronically send your prescription over to the pharmacy. That's all kind of enabled by through TELUS Health. And then lastly, the newest division where I first started with TELUS is TELUS Agriculture. It's the newest business unit, and it's following a very similar path to TELUS Health, where it's looking to digitize and bring together all of the various data points in the ag industry. So it has a full suite of software solutions as well. It's very software focused. Data management, operating under 3 different groups, so agribusiness, agri-food, as well as animal health. So what is the Internet of Things? So this is meant to be a very general talk today, and certainly if you've ever had to Google this, there's no shame in it. It is literally the Internet of Things. We're familiar with Internet, connecting our computers to get to one another, but ultimately the Internet of Things is a system of connected devices. So these devices are deployed and they collect data and send that data up to a cloud-based service. So ultimately, this data is meant to be collected very passively. There's no human intervention required. All these sensors have unique IDs, so they communicate directly to the cloud, where there's a software service, as well as you can often see, device-to-device communication, and then that data is shot up to the cloud. You've no doubt come into contact with a variety of IoT devices in your everyday life already. If you have a smart anything, you definitely have IoT. So smart TVs, you have a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, an Alexa. If you can control the thermostat in your home with your phone, you have an IoT device. As well as irrigation systems, those turning them on and off can all be handled remotely. So IoT is impacting our daily lives. It's driving efficiencies. It's reducing a lot of human error as that data is collected, by a device as opposed to a person. It's improving our productivity. We can be more places at once. And we can get a lot of improved decision making through those data insights. So all of these sensors connect to software platforms that are designed to help you understand what you're seeing in the data coming off of it and make better decisions. Why are we seeing more IoT? Well, and it's simply, it's facilitating an awful lot of automation. So it's predicted that by 2023, there'll be over 43 billion connected IoT devices globally. So this is growing quite exponentially. But when we think about repeat tasks that consume a lot of human resources, if there was a way to have a sensor to do that work for us, oftentimes with a lot more accuracy, that's a huge win. The ability to manage these systems remotely, we're all very busy people, and we travel long distances for work. If you're a farmer, you're living in remote areas, traveling an awful long distance across your operation or to the nearest town for various reasons. So the ability to manage certain things remotely on your phone and be able to react if there's an issue is a huge plus. The ability to conserve precious resources, being able to conserve power and conserve electricity, and also water in the case of irrigation systems. All sensors are different, and some are designed to collect minute by minute, second by second data, or some, with a different frequency. But ultimately, that's all pulling into a system that's going to allow you to see a lot of real-time data. And so that allows for better decision making and a whole lot of flexibility within our businesses and our daily lives. Global ag drivers. What are some of the needs of a global ag industry that is pushing for more interconnectedness, more technology like IoT? And certainly the environment is top of mind when we think about those drivers. There's a huge push for sustainability in agriculture. We've seen, due to climate change, the impacts of the economic impacts on agriculture when it comes to the flooding that we saw in BC last year, or the hurricane that hit Eastern Canada. These have tremendous impacts, and that is putting an awful lot of societal pressure on agriculture to be able to respond in some way. Higher standards for our agriculture, our dryland cropping practices, as well as animal welfare. So technology is kind of being looked to see if we can offer up some solutions. Food demand. If you've been in agriculture, you've definitely seen this statistic before, but the world's population is poised to hit 9.7 billion by 2050. I think we hit 8 billion last week. So this population too is demanding more and more calories, so it's putting increasing pressure on agriculture to be able to provide more food within the existing or smaller footprint and with fewer resources. And then we're constantly seeing the cost of inputs on the rise. So how can technology shift our ability to stay profitable and meet this demand? Water supply is another big challenge. So we know that here in Canada, we're quite lucky that we have an abundance of fresh water supply, but so much of our agriculture is, we're at the mercy of the weather with dryland cropping. But for those people who are able to take advantage of irrigation, we're going to see with the growth in population, increased urbanization, there are a lot more pressures put on our freshwater resources and therefore what is available for agriculture. What are some of the drivers that we're seeing off of the farm? When we consider what farm needs are driving more IoT and technology, some things that are revolutionizing and driving that change, hands down, are precision agriculture. It certainly has been at the forefront of all of these new advancements that we've seen. It's pushing for the expansion of the adoption as well as the different solutions available. But that whole need in precision ag to understand your operation and your fields at a really granular level requires a lot of sensor data, and IoT is one way that farmers can achieve that collection of data, is with a larger deployed sensor field. Sustainability, as I mentioned, farmers are under incredible pressure these days to be able to adhere to some pretty serious sustainability targets. How are they going to meet that challenge? It's with additional data sets that can help them make different farming practice adoptions, different schemes, whatnot. IoT can also help throughout the food systems for traceability. It can automate that traceability of food products, and it helps farms gain access to new markets and new companies, new food companies who may require them to adhere to certain practices to be able to be part of their group. So certainly that ability to track the food's journey across the food system and capture that data, IoT can enable that. Farmers are always looking for diversification in operations. The ability to take advantage of new markets is driving a lot of uptick. I mean, we've heard a lot about the ability to measure carbon in soil. We know that's quite challenging, but technology is trying. It's trying to get there. Farmers ultimately need to collect an awful lot of data on their operation, and they're typically they're not, if you're an average typical farmer, you don't have that many employees ultimately, so there's a lot of work to collect that information by a solo person. So the ability to do that passively through solutions and sensors is pushing for additional soil moisture sensors, the ability to get real-time weather conditions at your location as opposed to kind of public source weather data that tends to be fairly inaccurate. Machine telematics is a huge example of wanting to understand better what's going on their fleet, on a farm's fleet, to be able to anticipate required maintenance, understand fuel usage, those sorts of use cases. And then also on-farm grain inventories. So the ability to understand what the conditions are in the bin without having to walk up to it and take readings. IoT, that freeing the farmer up to be able to get that information remotely is definitely a push. So all that said, all of this data being collected together, what is the purpose of it? And that is better proactive decision making. So risk mitigation is such a huge part of farming, and that real-time data and the analytics that come off of the software, because most of these softwares have AI and algorithms that are helping to provide better insights into what that data actually means. And then the farmers are able to make better informed decisions. They can improve farm productivity and yields, and then ultimately save time and money. 95% of farms remain family-run operations. So to be able to free up some time to have hobbies, spend time with your family, like these are all really critical things. What are some IoT farm applications that we see today? Fleet, telematics, and fleet and equipment and telematics are certainly ones in precision ag that you're most likely very familiar with. That whole ability to have machine-to-machine communication between the tractor and various implements. And also, in addition to, there's a number of different fleet solutions out there that, advanced use cases could be putting telematics or a fleet's product in grain trucks to be able to optimize operations. You could have all that information coming to you and understand where you're at as you're harvesting, and be able to optimize that sequence and that dance of the grain trucks to the bin and then back to the field, all with the intent that hopefully you could save money on fuel and time, precious time. Remote support, so all of that ability for the equipment manufacturers to be able to parachute in and see what's going on in your machinery is enabled through IoT. Autonomous machinery, so this is very nascent. It's still a growing area, but this is all going to be enabled through IoT solutions. And also the live coverage and productivity analysis that's coming off the computers in the cab during harvest and whatnot. All of that yield data, that instant yield data, is all enabled through the IoT sensors. Asset inventory and commodity monitoring is another area of farm IoT. So asset tracking could be something very simple as, where's my stuff? It's a beacon sensor that you can put on equipment that is valuable and be able to keep track of it in an application. You can coordinate logistics too and understand what's going on in your fleet. The inventory monitoring, and there's various types of inventory that can be monitored, whether that's fuel, fertilizer, as well as the commodities in the bin. The ability to have those insights light up the bin so you can see what the temperature is. Do I need to turn on the dryers? Do I need to turn off the dryers so I don't risk damaging the quality? These are all things that IoT can automate. Building and home automation, lights, thermostats, these again have the ability to really help improve and save money on farm. Irrigation control, this is incredibly important for those operations that are under irrigation. Soil sensors to be able to understand what the current soil moisture is, and then time and schedule those pivots being turned on and off. And then lastly under here is the weather. So weather stations are very simple introductory IoT devices that we see a lot in farming. But those localized weather conditions are so important and valuable, just given that those public data sources are so far away in some instances. And two, it just helps with optimizing efficiencies of, if you have a weather station on one end of your farm, then you can make decisions about whether it's worthwhile to drive all the way over there and start cutting hay or various other activities. Worker safety is a bit of a passion project of mine, but it's also a really great way to incorporate IoT on the farm. There's a number of different wearable type devices that a person could use in addition to just a software app that you can keep on your phone. But there's some neat products out there that have fall detection built into them, and they're connected to a monitoring service so that if you do run into trouble, you can get immediate help. So much work is done alone on farm, and we want to keep our farmers safe. Enabling remote connectivity and geofencing. This is a really great aspect of so many IoT services, is that you can create geofences and then get alerts if a machinery or a person in some instances has broken that barrier, and keep your family safe, because farms are multi-generational. We have older people as well as younger people that want to contribute on farm, and there's some great ways to help keep them safer while still empowering them to kind of contribute. And lastly, all of this comes into reporting and analytics and real-time data. So farmers need that real-time data. They need to understand what's happening in the moment. But again, as mentioned, so many of the software have predictive AI in it to help give you another data point before you're making decisions. And the whole goal is to optimize and improve business performance. So what are some of the challenges we see in IoT? Because certainly we know they exist. Sensing in remote environments is very challenging. At the end of the day, each IoT device needs to have connectivity accessible to it to perform, and some remote conditions are difficult. Harsh climates, which kind of spells Canada. We have very, very high temperatures and we have some very low lows, and some devices don't perform as well in low temperatures. Rough terrain can also impact this, as well as areas of land that have a lot of tree coverage, that impacts that line of sight and reduces the functionality of the IoT device. This is very much a hot topic, cloud and cloud security. All of these solutions, what enables them to be so efficient is that they do have that direct to cloud communication and take advantage of an end-to-end cloud service. So protecting users' information needs to be something that's that manufacturers keep top of mind. And also, as a user, make sure you read the agreement, understand what's happening with your data. because protecting that user output data is very important. Complexity and cost. So there is a huge range in complexity when it comes to a lot of IoT solutions, because there's a never-ending pile of solutions that can work, but ultimately for them to be effective, they have to be simple to use, and they have to be simple to understand. There are more complicated solutions out there, but they just take more time, which oftentimes people don't have, to get over that learning curve and properly adopt it. So they need to be simple to adopt. Sometimes that's a challenge. And sometimes the ROI with certain IoT devices is not particularly clear. So having it be affordable and have a very specific, clear ROI is a challenge. Connectivity and power. This, again, with remote locations, that have limited connectivity, this is going to have an impact on how well the IoT functions. There's various different connectivity options, cellular, satellite, Wi-Fi, that may or may not be available where a person's trying to deploy them. There's wired and wireless sensors. Sometimes you may not necessarily want a wired sensor. It might not be appropriate. And wireless options, again, might be a challenge when it comes to connectivity, or in the case of the next topic, which is the battery power. So all of these devices have to be powered in some way. Some of them have a solar panel that will charge up a battery. Others use simple AA batteries that need to be changed out, or they need to be direct wired into a vehicle in a lot of instances. So where we live here in Canada, we may not necessarily get enough sunlight during the winter months to properly charge some of these solar panels, but there are ways that you can mitigate those challenges with reducing the frequency with which you're sending data and turning down those logging intervals. It can make a big difference. So I thought I'd spend a bit of time to just kind of share some of the various connectivity options that are available in IoT. Bluetooth is one of the simplest products out there for connectivity. If you have a Fitbit, that's how it's connecting. LoRaWAN is another terrific option, especially in rural areas. This is a private network that's built on farm. They can be quite costly, and it is on an unlicensed spectrum. So their security is something to be aware of, but my understanding is that they're working hard on this because it does have a really great fit in some remote parts of the prairies. Wi-Fi is a terrific option, and the new technology coming in with various Wi-Fi products is giving it much longer range than ever before. And then, of course, satellite, very important solution. This is under a licensed spectrum, but it also will enable connectivity in areas where, traditional cellular is maybe not as reliable. Under the cellular spectrum, we see a variety of different types of bands of connectivity, and it's important to understand which one your product works on, because not all of these bands are necessarily supported in all areas of Canada. So understanding whether it will work where you live is really important. NB-IoT is narrowband IoT, so it's a relatively new network that's been developed for products that use small amounts of data, or sending small amounts of data, and don't require a tremendously short intervals for logging. NB-IoT is really leveraging a lot of edge computing, so the more computing that can be done on the device itself, sending less data up to the cloud, reduces your data fees and ultimately improves the usefulness of that product. So that's a growing area, but again, it can't send very much data, so it really just depends on the type of data that it is collecting. LTE-M is a very common connectivity band for fleet and those types of services. Again, it sends, if your data getting minute by minute fleet information on where your trucks are, it is sending more frequently, so it needs something a little bit more powerful than, say, an NB-IoT, but not as much as we might say for LTE. So the LTE network is the one that we are probably most familiar with, this is where our cell phones operate, and there's a large number of IoT devices that work well on this network. This is licensed and protected, so there's a lot more security around it. 5G is the newest spectrum. It is a variety of different bands underneath it, and the greatest use for 5G that we see coming forward in agriculture is that it's really going to enable all of that autonomous operations. So when it comes to, you need to be able to send a large amount of data through these things. If we're thinking about autonomous vehicles, anything to do with a camera, you need to have an awful lot of band to be able to accomplish that. And you need to have very low latency. So that is, kind of the biggest features that we see coming in 5G, is that it's going to really reduce the download and upload speed, much less latency. You'll be able to send larger files of data, images, that kind of thing, to enable robotics and the advancement of precision agriculture. So the future of IoT, we think, is pretty bright. With the introduction of new technologies like 5G, we're going to continue to see a lot of growth in this space. Farms will continue to digitize, robotics and autonomous machinery will become more common, and in the long term, automation of farm production will alter farm labor requirements. So farm labor is an increasing challenge in rural areas, so this automation can help support with that. There will be benefits to insurance, banking, and tax credits with the rise in the adoption of IoT sensors, with the data that it collects to be able to support some of those processes. We're going to see an advancement of the networks and devices that are connected to the TELUS network. TELUS has announced a $70 billion investment in network infrastructure. And that's for operations as well as spectrum. All of the spectrum that's licensed in Canada has to be purchased. And so we've committed to do that to enable connectivity to more remote communities, and as well as supporting the country's agriculture industry. So one of the great benefits of TELUS getting into agriculture is that it has really allowed for agriculture to be advocated within a very large telco. So they're starting to see and understand the challenges and the needs, and I've seen a really tremendous uptick in understanding and support in recent years. But ultimately, this will all take time. This infrastructure does take time to put in, so we're not going to get there overnight, but there is definitely a strong commitment. And just to illustrate, where we see that investment going is typically within our legacy footprint of when we were originally a telco. So when Canada carved up the country and provided monopolies to various countries to provide connectivity, this is where kind of our legacy footprint exists. And then we partner with other companies to be able to provide services across Canada. But when I speak of that investment, it will be in the areas of purple that you see here, which is our legacy footprint for TELUS. Any questions? That would certainly be the hope. I mean, that requires a lot of infrastructure investment to be able to guarantee those speeds. But that is something that we see in the 5G generation, is that we can achieve those speeds, but to be able to commit to it would be, at minimum, would take time. We're not there yet. 100%. Yeah, I certainly working with TELUS, I've learned what their understanding of what rural is, and sometimes it's communities of about 10,000, but that understanding is shifting and changing. And I can say that we are trying to get creative and find solutions that can work in field and not just in larger centers. We've been running a couple of projects out at Olds College the last couple years, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to see some fruit from that very soon, looking at different types of connectivity to enable farms. But yeah, we're partnering to find solutions, and we've got some great help coming out of Olds. They've got a terrific dead spot at this Pittstra location, so it's been really valuable for us to trial and find some backstop solutions.